Hey, I'm John Wilkinson. This is my project Tree Driven Interaction. It explores novel paradigms around AI chat interactions, and I'm releasing it as part of my participation in the Backdrop Build mini incubator. The target audience for this project and video are large language model researchers and enthusiasts focused around inference and its application, programmers experienced or open to functional programming, and Power ChatGPT users who want an on-demand generated plugin feature. The problem my project seeks to solve is that modern LLMs have a very high ability to generate quality code, but they have limited context. Typical code bases are huge and infeasible to feed in all at once to the model, or it would be exorbitantly expensive, which almost always requires manual stitching, negating the benefit of using automation in the first place. Functional programming does provide more modular paradigms, but it comes with a steep learning curve that not everyone is open to jumping into immediately. The solution my project explores is generating, storing, and invoking highly modular functions directly in the conversation. It's powered by a Git-inspired branching-centric interface. The functions are stored and invoked as individually addressable AI-generated messages. And the whole thing is built from the ground up for modularity and composability. Here's a quick overview of the architecture of the project. Some key takeaways are that you do need your own OpenAI API key if you want to fully utilize the project. However, if you just want to explore the features and manually invoke some functions, almost all of the features are available for manual use. It's just not going to be as convenient as if the AI assistant is doing the work for you. It does run on GitHub Pages, which means it's very easy to fork and run your own copy, and it doesn't cost anything to run, aside from API fees, of course. And it uses rigorous push state integration so that it's very easy to jump back and forth between different conversation paths. Okay, so let's take a look at a demo. This is the main interface of the app. We're seeing a conversation between the AI assistant and a user. It's kicked off by a system message establishing context and referencing a particular function. The AI assistant ends up invoking that function, and a little bit of chatter happens after. We can continue adding messages to the end of this, or we can fork off from an earlier message. Please look up topics for Facebook's React library. The AI assistant will realize I'm trying to invoke that function, invoke it itself, take the values implied by my message, and return the results. We can see it's doing invoke dynamic function, which is one of the functions we currently have enabled. If we pull up that function, we can either manually invoke it ourselves, particular values, or we can just look at the information provided to the AI assistant when it makes its decisions about invoking the function. If we want to look at where that function came from, we can click on it to follow it to the message address. So we see our snaky message address here, and we can see it's actually a composition that I did of two different functions together. The inner function gets executed first, and then the results of that gets passed to the outer function. So if we look at the inner function here, we can see that it's a JSON P data retrieval, and it's taking two values, the username and repo name, and feeding them into a template. I actually didn't need to give it this template. It just knew about how the GitHub API worked, so I just gave it natural language asking for it and did a little bit of iterating to get it to get to just the right place. And then if I go back using back navigation, I can get back to where I was and then investigate this outer function that will be receiving JSON from that first function. So we can see it's taking the input and doing JSON parse on the event it receives, and then doing an extraction of topics from that, and then turning that into a series of strings. And I actually didn't look up the documentation for this at all. I just explored the API naturally by having it build some functions on the fly to retrieve all the keys and values from an example repository. And based on that, I built this function, or rather had it build this function based on my natural language. And then if we want to test this in isolation without the GitHub JSON P retrieval, we can simply say, invoke this function with some contrived JSON that has a key of topics pointing at an array of strings. Then the AI assistant will realize what we're trying to do, invoke that function up there, even though I didn't even specify it by address, and pass in some strings to under the topics, and we can see, yes, it's functioning correctly. It pulls those out.